Hello everyone, ex-Wallkill Bethelite here, and I want to talk a little bit more about the topic surrounding violent acts happening to the cult of Jehovah's Witnesses. Now, many people are surprised by this. When something happens, for example, the bomb that, or bombs that went off in India, where they had all the chairs put together for a convention. And I think about 50 or more people were blown up. There is a certain amount of surprise that people have when this happens. One of the reasons why I want to talk about this is because when you turn on the news, when you sit down in the evening and you turn on the news, or a lot of us don't watch the news. A lot of us, we get our news from YouTube. We get our news from social media. And when you hear about shootings on the news or on social media, when you hear about murders, when you hear about fights breaking out, when you hear about violent acts on the news, nobody's surprised. Nobody's surprised. Not a single person would be shocked if they turned on the Channel 7 news and heard that there was a shooting and however many people were shot. Not a single person would be surprised if they put the word Chicago in YouTube to get current events on what's going on in the city of Chicago. And they heard that there was a party with 40, 50 or more people. And someone shot up the party. No one would be surprised. No one would be shocked. So we need to discuss why there's such a big difference when it comes to Jehovah's Witnesses and the shock and the surprise when they are involved with violent acts. Now, we often talk along the lines of right or wrong. We want to touch on this a little bit. We often talk along the lines of right or wrong. So when a violent act happens, there tends to be a need to decipher whether or not it was right or whether or not it was wrong. Typically, we all understand that these things are not legal. So there shouldn't need to be a discussion on morality as to whether or not violent acts are right or wrong. We tend, as a global society, to understand that violence isn't favorable. However, and this is an important point, while pretty much globally, mankind is aware that violence is not favorable, violence tends to be one of the number one ways people deal with situations that they do not like. How do I know this? Look at the news. It doesn't matter if you are in Ohio, California, Washington, Chicago, Oregon, Texas, turn on your news and turn on the local news, just covering your area. And let's see if you do not have something in common with every state in America, every country in the world. The news is covering violence. Violence tends to be one of the number one ways people deal with things, whether it's right or whether it's wrong. Throughout human history, violence tends to be one of the number one ways people deal with things, particularly things that push a person emotionally and psychologically to a point where they become angry or upset. So when we talk about violence, we're not talking about something that there is any society, to my knowledge, in America that is surprised that it happens. So we should not be surprised and bewildered and just taken aback if violent acts occur surrounding a cult. Because we're not surprised when violent acts happen surrounding a gang. Now, we can have the debate as to whether or not these organizations that get labeled as gangs are just inherently evil, but we still are not surprised. And it doesn't matter the age range. It doesn't matter if somebody's 13 years old and they were claiming to be a member of this organization that we've decided is a gang, and they end up dead. We're not surprised. There's news reports of gang members. These are we can get into the debate as to whether or not it's a gang or just an organization, whatever the case may be. But for the sake of argument, let's just call it a gang, because we all know what that is. There's been news reports where gang members are at McDonald's to get their children food, and the car is shot up by someone that was affected negatively, whether it be that particular person or just somebody else who was a member of that organization / gang. Someone was affected negatively to the point they became so angry that they shot up the car, most likely knowing that there were children in that car. When there are these block parties in Chicago, and I'm talking there's tons of people outside, partying, barbecuing, and there are, again, members of a particular organization, we'll call it a gang, having fun at that party, there have been news reports pretty frequently. We shouldn't be surprised by this because it's so frequent that it happens. That someone who was affected, we don't know how, but they were affected negatively, and the effect it had on their psyche was that they were going to resort to violence, and it didn't matter that they were kids, 12 years old, 8 years old. People were pregnant at the party, unborn kids that get shot up in these situations. We're not surprised when it happens. It's not a discussion of whether it's good or it's bad. It's a discussion of we expect violent acts to occur surrounding certain organizations, typically gangs. It's not a discussion of whether it's right or it's wrong. Most people around the world know that this is not favorable. This doesn't really tend to contribute to a good day. Shooting up a party or being in a party that's gotten shot up. Violence doesn't tend to be whether it's the person committing the violence or the person who is the recipient of the violence. It doesn't tend to, unless there's something, wrong. This doesn't tend to be a joyous occasion. So the discussion of whether is it good? Is violence good? That's a discussion for another day. The discussion is that violence happens every single day in America. And America is supposedly the richest country in the world. It happens every single day in every single city, all through the country. Violence happens all the time. How are people surprised? It's on the news every night. The discussion should be more surrounding limiting the events that lead to violence. So if I do not want to be associated with anything that would bring violence upon myself. Oftentimes you have people who leave these organizations called gangs because they may not do anything. We all know that there are people who are members of organizations we call gangs that haven't done a single thing to anybody. But it doesn't matter. They're associating with something that someone else, whether it be the leadership of the organization that we call gangs, or just someone else who was a member of that same gang, has done things to people, bad things to people. And as a result, anybody associated with it, it doesn't matter how old they are, can be a recipient of violent acts. Let's take Jehovah's Witnesses, for example. This is an organization. We don't call it a gang because it surrounds religious ideas. Now, I'm sure there are gangs that have teachings that, are probably good teachings, but we still call them gangs. But this Jehovah's Witnesses, they're a cult, they're a religion. We don't in America tend to associate any kind of a negative connotation to anything that has anything to do with religion. However, Jehovah's Witnesses have done, whether it be the leadership or whether it be individual members, have done extreme damage to countless people all around the world. Extreme damage to countless people all around the world. It's not surprising that violent acts occur. If I were to walk down the street and do something as simple as stepping on people's toes, it would not be surprising if eventually, and we're just talking about shoes, got a person's shoes dirty. No one would be surprised if Marcus walks down the street and just steps on everyone's shoes. All they got to do is wipe it off. I didn't destroy their family. I didn't give them medical advice that directly leads to people in their family dying. I didn't create policies that set the perfect scenario for people to get molested. I didn't cause people to commit suicide based on my extreme shunning policies. I didn't do none of that. All I did is walk down the street stepping on people's shoes. And if someone resulted to violence, no one would be surprised. Over some shoes. If I walk down the street tipping people's ice cream cones out of their hands, no one would be surprised if someone resulted violently. It's just ice cream. There's plenty more of it. The cone costs $3 or $4. But if Marcus goes tipping ice cream cones out of people's hands, somebody's walking with a nice waffle cone of ice cream, and I just take my hand and grab the ice cream off the top and I bite into it and walk off. No one would be shocked. No one would be surprised. No one would think the FBI needs to look into this. But if an organization causes massive damage to millions of people all over the globe, people are shocked. If a violent act occurs, it's not logical. It's not logical. It's the reality of the world we have lived in. If you're 50, it's the reality of the world you've lived in for 50 years. If you're 60, it's the reality of the world you have lived in for 60 years. Violent acts occur. It doesn't even have to be something major to even cause the violent act to occur. So if an organization is extremist, Jehovah's Witnesses are extremists, and that organization is destroying families, causing suicides, causing flat out deaths, directly telling people not to take medical procedures that would save their lives, is directly causing death. I even personally wanted to see if they still taught policies that involve people directly stating to doctors, I do not want this treatment. I would prefer to die than take it. I wanted to find out for sure if they still did it. So I called an elder. You remember when they had phone numbers all on the cult's website? I called an elder and directly talked to him about it. He didn't know who I was. But he said that Jesus would chastise me if I were to take a blood transfusion in a hospital and I was in dire need of it or I would die. The elder on the phone said, well, you can take the transfusion, but if you do, you will not be in God's kingdom. Jesus would chastise you. He would say, you have disobeyed me directly. So yes, the cult is still teaching people that if you do not die versus take certain medical procedures, Jesus is going to be mad at you. Do you know how much damage that causes when that is taught to millions of people all around the planet? The amount of damage, the scale of the damage that the cult does to people is not measurable. So it's not a discussion of, is violence bad? Is violence good? I don't even understand why we have the discussion. Is it bad? Is it good? It occurs, and it occurs every day. And if you think it's bad, you ought not be involved with anything that would cause it. You ought not be associated with anything that angers large groups of people. And if you choose to do so, you choose to be associated with an organization, whether it be a cult, a gang. We all know cults are bad. They've got entire series on Netflix about cults, and they were all bad. They all caused damage to people. So it's not a matter of, we don't know cults are bad. We know cults are bad. It's pretty much across the board. Pretty much anybody around the globe knows cults are bad. And they cause damage. So a person choosing to associate themselves with that, they need to take precautions. They need to protect their family. Now, if they decide to ignore the damage, ignore the warnings, you can get on YouTube, type in the word Jehovah's Witnesses, and you got people warning for as long as there's been YouTube. So if people are deciding to just ignore the warnings, if everybody says, Marcus, don't go down the street stepping on everybody's toes. You think it's funny. You think it's not illegal, so I can do it. But who knows what type of day a person has? Who knows what that person is going through? So something as simple as stepping on the toe of a person who was going through extreme duress. Someone could have died in their family. They could have lost their job. They could be going through a divorce. Something as simple as stepping on someone's toes, when it's avoidable, you don't have to do it, but you do it anyway, we all know could cause an outburst of violence. So there's no surprise when a cult who is mass, when you talk about, I'm talking mass, damaging people at mass who are going through who knows what. The cult took their whole family, so whatever it is they're going through is magnified times 1,000. Magnetized times 1,000, because the cult has the shunning policy. It takes away your family. So it's harder for you to get through things. I could step on someone's toe and they got their whole family to give them emotional support, and they still may break out in a violent act and take a swing at me or something for stepping on their toe. We're not surprised by that, but a cult who takes everyone's family, they don't have an emotional support system because the cult turns their back on them, takes away their family, pushes them to who knows what limits, and then we're shocked that something violent may happen. It's not a shock so much as I just think people don't want it to happen to the cult. They want cults to have some sort of magical shield where there's violence that happens every day to all types of people Some of them haven't done anything to deserve it. All different ages of people. Some of them 10, 9, 8 years old. Violence happens all the time, but we don't want it to happen to Jehovah's Witnesses, even though we all know they're involved with things that's gonna cause it at some point. What needs to happen, the solution isn't trying to, I don't know, pamper them whenever it happens. The solution is what some countries have already done, and that is make cults illegal. Make extremist groups illegal. That way, the cult is safely behind bars. You know how many people would still be alive if they had been just put behind bars and left there when they were supposed to be? There's a lot of people who lived years and years and years in jail, 11, 12, however many years in jail. Then they get out of jail and end up dead. They were safer inside the prison. The countries that have made extremist groups and cults illegal are the countries that are keeping people safe. The cult is safe. They can't commit mass suicide or whatever it is they want to do in the prison, because if they are even on suicide watch, they ain't even allowed to have shoestrings, so it'd be really hard. And it also protects the people that the cult does damage to, because the person's in prison. Wouldn't it be nicer for countries to say, hey, let's stop all this by making extreme groups that do extreme damage to untold countless people illegal, and give them a nice, hefty, fair, sizable prison sentence, and put them in prison where they can be as extreme as they want behind jail cells there, you know? They can be behind a jail cell and they can sing a kingdom melody until the cows come home, but you can't hurt nobody but yourself. Isn't that better than someone having to set off a bomb blowing up 50 some odd people in India? Isn't that better than somebody shooting up a Kingdom Hall in Germany? Isn't that better than whoever it was that was torching Kingdom Halls in Washington, setting them all on fire? Someone in another country blew the doors off of a Kingdom Hall. Isn't it better? Just make extreme cults illegal. Don't let them run rampant and destroy lives and act shocked when someone acts violently. When we know people act violently, probably the majority of the time, when things happen to them. Not everyone, but enough people to where it shouldn't be a shock. There's a lot of people that don't react violently. But if I do something extreme to a negative degree to millions of people, no one would be shocked if something happened. Comment down below. Let me know what you think. Make them illegal. Just make the cult illegal. Solves the problem. Yeah, you're going to have people boo-hooing about, oh, they're in prison. But they're in prison and they can sing Kingdom Melody and they can read Watchtower in there and write on toilet paper. They do all that stuff. Letter writing, toilet paper letter writing, all that good stuff. Comment down below. Let me know what you think. 937-789-4029. We'll discuss it. X-Wall Kill Bethelite signing out.